It's been said many times before, but it remains true. Never work with children or animals. Sod off, Sophie. Hello, Captain VFC here with another build analysis video, or for short, BAV. So if you hear me popping off to the bavatry, or talking about bavel brush, pause for laughter. Yes, basically this is some footage of me from various live streams making these two kits that we are talking about, the KP Hawker Tempests. We have one Mk.2 and one Mk.5, and I'm just going to talk about the build experience. So this is not a in-depth, every part being glued together sort of video, because I'm not very good at that. So enjoy, or don't, I don't care. I will quickly mention the camera changes during this video. There are several times where you will see the camera, for example here, is much higher up. Later on in the video it gets closer. This is me very much trying to find what works best, so please bear with it, and whatever does work best, mention in the comments below for you. Obviously, what works best for you. What works best for me is forgetting where I put it before and just trying a new thing every time. But yes, in addition to talking about the kits and the experience that I came across, I will also have a little history of the aircraft itself, the Hawker Tempest. I have discussed the history of the kit in the unboxing video, so if you want to learn a little bit more about that, just go and have a watch. I'm sure you'll find it thrilling and entertaining seeing me looking at bits of plastic falling out of a box. As this is a double build of two aircraft, I'm not showing double the footage. I am jumping between them, so sometimes it may look a little bit odd if you see that I've done something to a plane that you didn't think you'd witnessed in the background. So I just thought I'd mention that as well. Also, you will see lots of times, lots of instances of me dry fitting this. Now, I dry fit anyway, right? I don't put glue on something till I know it's going to fit, but this in particular, there are no locating pins, and the instructions, as we'll talk about, are more of a guideline. So if you see me clamping the fuselage together, for example, that is just to make sure that the interior actually fits. It's not necessarily an indication that I've glued it. So no, I do not have an entire production run of these things that I keep gluing together and then gluing together and then gluing together and then no, that is just me having to sand down every single component due to the nature of the tooling. Like I say, more on that in a moment. For now, let's have a little history about the Hawker Tempest. The Tempest was Hawker's attempt at improving on the rather underwhelming performance of the Typhoon. Now, before any Typhoon fans get all hissy about me bad-mouthing their plane, I am well aware that in time the Typhoon would prove itself as a bloody decent fighter bomber. But in 1941 it was a very troubled prototype. The main area of development was the wing. The high drag of the Typhoon's traditionally built main wing made performance at anything above low altitude a bit rubbish. Coupled to this, the Typhoon's Napier Sabre engines were proving themselves unreliable. Oh, and the aircraft also had a somewhat annoying tendency to disintegrate in mid-air, especially the tail units. So the Typhoon 2 was developed to address the drag issues by mating a new low-drag laminar flow wing to the existing Typhoon design. However, with all the other changes that were being made, it was effectively a new aircraft being built, and the name was changed to Tempest. A variety of engines were tested at prototype stage, with the Marks 1 and 5 having versions of the Sabre, 3 and 4 versions of the Rolls-Royce Griffon, and the Mark II trialling the Bristol Centaurus. Because the RAF assigned these designations before any of the prototypes actually flew, and aided by the Sabre 2 being the engine of choice for the Typhoon, which means Napier had worked really hard to improve its reliability, the Mk.5 was the first to fly, and the first to enter service, doing so in March 1944. It proved to be an extremely capable aircraft and gained a particularly good reputation at shooting down V-1 flying bombs, as well as proving a decent adversary for the German Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter, because of the high speed and manoeuvrability at low altitude. Now, admittedly, some of that was somewhat cheating by pouncing on 262s as they were coming in for landing, but hey, results are results. Marks 1 and 3 would never enter service, and the Mark IV would never even be built. but the Mark II remained in development and finally entered service after the war had already ended. One further variant, the Mark VI, with an improved Napier but retaining the wing root intakes of the Mark II, would also enter production and serve post-war in the Middle East. Thank you, History Captain. You see, you learn something new every day. Now, if I had to describe the experience of making this kit without using words, I would probably go something like, ugh, and then, ooh, then ah, and then ugh, and then I'd just scream into the void, and then I'd be content again. This is, if compared with the Airfix one, which, let's face it, is likely to happen, they're both from about the same sort of year. The Airfix one is a joy to build. It makes itself in some places. It is beautifully thought out. It is very, very simple, but also enjoyable. Like, it's not so simple that you're not really doing anything. It's a beautiful, cleverly designed kit. So, the KP one. Firstly, it is cleverly designed. It is very well engineered. The differences between these two toolings are really just an extra couple of sprues on the Mark II and the Mark VI, which contains the weapons and stuff. And as I've said, that is all fine. So you're basically building the fuselage up to behind the engine, and the wings, save for the radiator, which you can see I'm working on the wings here. There's a big gap in the wing roots of both of the sets of wings. So for the Mark V, you put what is effectively a blanking plate. For the Airfix one, of course, you don't have the functionality of a Mark II, and the wings are just top and bottom. Whereas here you have to put in these blanking plates. Now, when you've got when you've got good locating pins and things, this wouldn't really be an issue. But when you've got to do it just flush with plastic, you've got to get it right. When you've got the intakes, like the Mark II, you can get away with maybe not putting it 100% perfectly because it's a shapely piece anyway. But when it's just a continuation of the wing, if you mess that up, yeah, it's going to look bad. But where we are here now is we've got the interior grey-green painted, and I'm just applying some Tamiya Chrome, X11, whatever it said, X11, something like that, over the top, and on the instrument panel, just to bring some detail. Now, there is actually a decal on the inside for the control panel, and you can see absolutely zero of it, so it really makes no difference. Was there a decal? There might not have even been a decal. I might have made it up. I definitely remember painting something. Anyway, the interior up to this part has been okay. Now, due to the lack of locating pegs, you really only get a very rough guideline as to where things go. So I assembled the cockpits with, which obviously needs to be a right angle, with the floor lined up onto the one locating ridge that you've got inside, and the back with the headrest poking out the top, and then clamp the fuselage together. And that's how I set it as a 90-degree angle. You see here I'm moving on to the engine of the Mark II. The engine is comprised of two sides. The front is supposed to be round to go with the radial engine, and there's a cowling over it as well. And the bit where it joins the fuselage is meant to be fuselage shaped. I had great difficulty getting these two bits to line up. Something just, I say two bits, two shapes, like the front and the back. Something just wasn't quite working for me. So I cemented the sides together first, but whilst everything is still wet, tried to get the engine cowling in. Needed a lot of filing, just because there was a lot of just general flash. Got to get the, whatever this sort of hub over the top of it on as well. You see I've already glued it on there, and I think I probably didn't get it quite right. It doesn't look 100% centered to me, but there are no locating pins. It just sort of sticks on the actual pistons itself. And then a lot of this twisting to try and get the actual cowling in the right position. It's supposed to be round, but just something about it wasn't quite right. However, despite this general significant amount of faffery, this engine was considerably easier to assemble than the Mark V. But we'll get to that in a sec. Here I am. You see, previously it was clamped together just for the purpose of making sure everything dried correctly. Once the interior was painted grey, it was all given the interior was painted grey, it was all given a wash of the Citadel Basilicanum grey, whatever the grey washy stuff that I like is. And then you've got the other paraphernalia. You've got the head-up display sort of, it's not head-up display, it's like the aiming thing. You know what I mean. There's a clear glazing bit. And then just Revell contactor to stick the fuselage halves together and get them nicely clamped. This might also be where the problem that I had with both engines stemmed from. And that is, the fuselage sort of goes together a little bit too tight towards the engine. I think had I glued the engine on before the wings, maybe that would have saved me some stress. I don't know. But then the whole plane assembled like this. And this is me gluing the Mk.5 engine on, but let me talk more about that. I had two engines for the Mk.5 because, of course, I had two kits, or two base kits, and then the extra sprues. The instructions were wrong, and there's going to be a lot of that in this kit. Not only in sort of things like saying, oh, part 13 goes here, and you're looking at it and you're like, no, it doesn't. It's just wrong. But also you're looking at sprue maps and you go, well, that part isn't there. That just doesn't exist. What are you talking about? And in the case of the engine for the Mk.5, it tells you to stick a bit, I believe it's in front, like this, the top, the horizontal, on top, on the side of the vertical. And it should instead go on top, or vice versa. And I didn't work this out the first time. I just sort of followed the instructions. I thought, oh yeah, it fits into one side nicely. And then I tried to put the other side on, and it was disaster. It was just a pain in the backside. It did not fit at all. So here I am with the other engine, having now worked out just by trial, error, and hacking apart at what I did, how to actually get it to fit. I've pre-painted interior green into the intake on the chin, and then I assembled it the correct way. And this time, it went together beautifully. Absolute joy. And that definitely sums up the experience with this kit. As you'll see later, this was not the biggest drama of the build either. You don't get this with the Airfix tooling. It's an Airfix tooling. It's a new Airfix tooling. What do you think is going to happen? You just put glue in the right place, boom, stick it together, done. And the detail on the engine, I think, also gives away the two Tempests when you see them sitting next to each other. I mean, they're different colours, but the Airfix one has rivet detail in addition to the panel lines. The KP one has very, very nicely moulded panel lines, but it has no rivet detail. And then you see me here trial fitting the engine. Everything was absolutely fine. When I actually went to glue it on, for some reason, it just didn't quite fit. And I have no idea why. I still don't know why. I've had to think about it, had a look, don't get it. Anyway, moving on to the painting. The Tempest Mk.2 has been primed in black. I'm not doing a natural metal finish. This is an RAF high-speed silver finish. The difference is simple. RAF high-speed silver was a paint. It was sort of an aluminium mixed, sort of paint mixed with lacquer. And it comes across as a very dull, rather non-metallic metal colour. It looks exactly like it is, really. It looks like a silver paint. So I'm using the Hawker RAF high-speed silver, which is from a post-war set or modern RAF set. I still think it's too shiny. But I slapped it on with a big flat brush, and it was a little bit thin. This is the only paint that I was tempted to get the airbrush out for and actually paint it, but I want to brush. I like brush painting. Brush painting is my preference because it's more enjoyable. For monochrome planes, I really should just airbrush them, and this sort of taught me a lesson. Maybe I should. Meanwhile, the cowling was painted in it's actually US Navy True Blue as a interwar period colour. It was just the closest blue that I had. I thought it would look quite nice. It sort of matched the colour on the insignia, so that's why I did it. The Mk.5 was painted again with the Hawker colours. This time, of course, it is the Second World War set. So we've got ocean grey on the top, which I really like this paint set. It just makes RAF aircraft look right to me. You know, something just fits beautifully. And the underside, of course, is the medium sea grey, and then it will be camouflaged in the dark green colour. Brush painting also gives you the added bonus of if you're a bit sloppy with filler, the paint is a bit thicker. The way it's applied just fills in those gaps a little bit more. I didn't use anything more than a tiny bit of filler on these kits. Just particularly the Mk.2 round the engine. I had more trouble with that one than the Mk.5, despite the Mk.5's engine being an absolute pain in the backside. But I didn't use that much filler. Just the usual places, the wing roots, just to tidy a few things up. It was honestly the way that these kits come together. Yeah, fantastic. This modern KP stuff really is just the tits. And then obviously after the painting, we get to the decals. This is where the closest I've been to throwing the kit against the wall approached. They disintegrated. Well, I say they. The Mk.2 was now ahead of the Mk.5. So I finished the Mk.2 earlier. And it went, the decals went on without any problems. I used Microsol, Microset, and it was just fine. You know, they were okay. They looked good. Apart from, on the underside, the registration goes over the wheel well, over the landing gear. And so rather than providing, for example, I don't know, separate parts for left, right and underneath or whatever, instead of that, they just supply you with one long number and don't tell you about the problem. I say problem, don't tell you that it's not going to work if you're doing it with the wheels down. So, having already got the decal wet, having already tried to apply it, I now get a pointy, sharp, fresh knife blade out and try and very carefully cut the bit around the bad bit of the hole, basically, the bit which shouldn't be there. Very, very carefully try and cut that and then apply that to the undercarriage legs. I had not actually, doors, sorry, not legs. I hadn't actually painted the undercarriage doors by this time, which makes things a little bit awkward. So I'm now basically leaving them there panicking whilst I paint the doors, then get as much of it on as I can. That wasn't enough, and I'm left with some patches. So after it all dried, get out some black paint and then fill in the blanks, paint from there. And they're all very angular stenciled numbers, so it kind of works. If there was just some indication in the instructions that this would be necessary, this would have been avoided. It was very annoying. Thankfully, because I'd made a mistake on one side, I didn't do it on the other side. Actually, you saw earlier I cut the affected numbers off. I later went around them with a knife, like put the undercarriage door on as a blanking plate and went from there. Which brings us on to the decals for the Mk.5. Yes. Where do I start? The decals are wrong. The ones on the top wing are wrong. They're supposed to have the yellow outer ring, and they didn't. I just soldiered on and put on the closest I could find at first, and then as I was doing them on the side of the fuselage, it disintegrated. It just disintegrated. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of a decal repair, how I got around the fact that it disintegrated. Well, firstly, red bottle. Soften those decals, and then a cocktail stick to scrape the decals away, being very careful not to damage the registration, which is EDM. I did this on both sides for consistency, and then removed them from the top wings as well. I just decided, as I'm removing the broken ones, I might as well at least put the correct ones on the top wing. The replacements came from Airfix. They are from, I believe, the Typhoon, which I made a few years ago. I made whichever colour didn't have the yellow rings around it, and I put those on instead. It is night and day. The quality of these Airfix ones, these cartograph ones, oh man, it blows the horrible KP things out of the water. Honestly, everyone should use them. Although then it would they'd not have any competition and they wouldn't strive to be better. But anyway, enough about economics. So, problem solved. However, even the ones which I didn't have to change are really low resolution. They just look pixelated and horrible. And the Mk.2 didn't have that. And I don't know why. The Mk.2, absolutely fine. Mk.5, crap. So, nearly very much ruined the kit and is one of the reasons why I applied zero weathering. I slapped on the walkways, so masked the black walkways. Oh, also, we completely missed it. I put the yellow on the wingtips as well, leading edges of the wings, which is nice, Tamiya yellow. Painted on the walkways, and there we go, more or less done. So, with that in mind, we're going to move on to a little showcase, as I usually do. Just enjoy the images of these, and of course compared with the Airfix one, which is showing next to it. Thank you everyone for watching. Just like and subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell if you want to be notified. I'm hoping to get a video out every other week. Yeah, thank you. Bye. BAV out. No, that's awful. Oh, don't say BAV out.